Is this the time for the Vikings to get into press coverage, plus prop bets and your bold predictions here on the Locked On Vikings podcast?
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. You can also find the show on Amazon Fire or Roku if you just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app on those smart TVs. Thank y'all for your patience. Last couple days been on the road trying to do this on a remote setup, so things have looked weird, sounded weird. So thanks for sticking with me. We're back home, and we can look a little deeper into this Colts matchup. We have prop bets coming up in the You Betcha segment, and of course, your bold predictions at the end of the show. But first, I want to address maybe one of the strategic things that I hear talked about a lot, and just kind of talk through it. Off coverage, press coverage. Brett Coleman, who I guess he's working on a Vikings video. It should be interesting. I love Brett. You should go watch his YouTube channel. Had a tweet that got a lot of run, a lot of discussion, that said basically every DB in the Vikings secondary is 6 feet or taller, save Shannon Sullivan, who's a nickel, and they're 31st in the NFL in total press snaps. They use press second to last in the league, and they only call man-to-man 10% of the time. So the implication being, hey, you have these big, tall corners, and you're not actually using that reach to like jam dudes at the line, right? And I do agree with Brett. I think that is a mistake. I think that there's, I always thought Cameron Dantzler was at home, like getting up into people's faces and pressing, even though he's a skinny guy. That's how he played in college, and I think that's the kind of style of play that got him drafted, and nobody has had him do that since, like, neither Zimmer nor Donatel. So I've kind of thought, like, hey, let him get up into somebody's face, and if it's risky, it's risky, but, that might be the best way for him to play. It's not the way we've done it. And the reason for that is kind of a lack of trust in those guys and in Patrick Peterson's speed. Because when you are in press, and if you make a mistake, if you get beat off the line, I mean, watch just some Justin Jefferson tape to watch what happens when you're in press and you get beat off the line. Because he does that to guys all day long. It's a catastrophe. It's a big problem. And that's just something the Vikings don't want to open themselves up to. But considering that they are dead last in the league in defense right now, it's hard to see how their alternative is better than that. I would love to see the Vikings press a little bit. Now, here's the deal. The Colts roster, their wide receiver room has Michael Pittman, who's 6'4", 223. Alec Pierce, 6'3", 221. Mike Strawn, 6'5", 224. These are big boy wide receivers. Is this the time to press? The size that might be a reason to press, right? To stop them from getting up a whole bunch of momentum. You also have the idea of Matt Ryan, who is not the dude he used to be, but I do think Matt Ryan can find completions. At least in the Colts games that I have watched, he's able to find completions. Whether they're positive plays or not is one thing, but he's a veteran. He can, get quickly to his check down and stuff. And that's actually something you can kind of prey on. You can back everything off and let them dink their way down the field 5 yards at a time. And they have to string together a 14, 15 play drive without screwing anything up. That can be a way to play defense in this league. This might work out really well against the attack that the Colts present. And listening to Jake yesterday on Crossover Thursday, by the way, listen to Crossover Thursday for some talk about the whole problems with the Colts offense. Their run game has just not been there. And that's really weird considering that they're the Colts and how much of a Jonathan Taylor was going first overall in fantasy drafts. The expectations were sky high and they just haven't hit. This has been one of the worst offenses in the league versus one of the worst defenses in the league. Now, I'm going to get to the other side of the ball, too, in a little bit, especially when we talk about the You Betcha, the Grambles. But I don't know how the Colts are going to handle Justin Jefferson. There's no Kenny Moore, which is massive, by the way. He's already been declared out for the game. He's one of the better slot corners in the league, and the Colts have not had anybody really play the slot outside of him. He has been the guy in the slot, at least per PFF's charting. So the Colts defense, this is a Gus Bradley defense, right? He's off the Pete Carroll tree. This is going to be like a cover 3 sort of base, right? But in their ideal world, if the Colts had it their way, they would want to man you up and play cover 1 all day long. That's man-to-man across the board and just one deep guy, and then an extra, blitzer maybe, or somebody lurking underneath, depending on the cover 1 call. But that's the way they want to live. They want to live in man-to-man, mano-y-mano, your guy versus my guy. Stephon Gilmore versus Justin Jefferson. But Gilmore hasn't gone into the slot. Rock Yassin also questionable for this game. They've got a couple other corners that have, I think they've got good corner depth. And I think that the Colts defense, as well as it has played, they want to live in a single high world, have that extra guy in the box, stop the run. If you can punish that, and the Vikings, a lot of this McVay offense was designed in a world where that Pete Carroll style of defense was in vogue. And so it was designed to attack that more than anything. And I think about the times that teams have left single high safeties. I think of like the first few drives of the Bears game where they sprinted out to that 21-point lead. And I think of like some of the best offensive games that the Vikings have been against single high defenses, and the Colts are a single high defense. Now, way back when McVay was doing 2017, when he was his first year as a Rams head coach, or even going back to when he was in Washington, 2015, 2016, when it was Kirk Cousins, those offenses were designed to beat a way different version of the Pete Carroll defense than what Gus Bradley is running now. Like, things have adapted and evolved, and there's a lot more flexibility to it than there used to be. So there's no easy out, right? But I think schematically, I guess all I'm saying is I like this matchup. I think this matchup favors the Vikings well. I just like the way that the architecture of the Colts defense matches up with the architecture of the Vikings offense. And in particular, I like that we have like one of those superstars that there isn't like a clear slam dunk answer for what the Colts do against that. So that's why I'm going to take some JJ overs. I got an interesting one coming up in the You Betcha, the Gramblin segment. So we can get into that. And of course, we'll also get into your bold predictions. Before I do any of that, look, it's chilly outside, all right? You may have noticed. So don't face the dead of winter in old t-shirts and ratty sweats. Fight cold with Cozy, or help your loved ones fight cold with Cozy this good old holiday season with Tommy John. Tommy John is cozy, silky, luxurious, lovely for this time of year especially. And you can shop Tommy John's Wrap It Up sale right now. You can give the gift of comfort to everyone on your list, including yourself, all right? Treat yourself. Take care of yourself with Tommy John underwear, loungewear, and pajamas. Every gift is backed by Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear, or it's free guarantee. So hurry to Tommy John's Wrap It Up sale and get 30% off of everything, plus free shipping at TommyJohn.com/locked-on. Order now so your gift arrive, so your gifts arrive before the holidays. That's 30% off plus free shipping at TommyJohn.com/locked-on. TommyJohn.com/locked-on. See site for details. Thanks a million for making Locked On your first listen of the day, Locked On Vikings. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. It is a daily podcast in the same vein as this one, but it's covering the wide world of sports, all the biggest games and headlines. Also, check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. If you want to know what's up with all the TFLs the Vikings have given up, I did an episode on that. And I also have an episode that may come out on, I think, Friday. That is a sort of a version of the Wednesday episode of Locked On Vikings, but with visuals and a little bit more of a like coherent flow with, film and stuff. And I'll also have an article option there too. You can also still win a Vikings jersey. Just look at the show description, click the link. There's a tweet that will tell you everything you need to know. That raffle will wrap up on Christmas. So on Christmas, that will be when. So you have until Christmas to get donations into my favorite bunny charity. Do it for the rabbits. All right. It's time for some Grambles. You betcha. the Gramblin segment where I tell you a couple of prop bets that I like for Vikings games. We'll look at how we did in the Lions game, and I didn't do great. I did get Justin Jefferson over 6.5 receptions. I think he hit just about every over in that game, and I think that might just keep happening. The over-unders for JJ last week were really depressed because of what happened in week 3, because he got held to 14 yards in week 3. And I think we were right to kind of say that, well, that was probably a one-off, and I don't think the Lions can pull that off again. And they couldn't. JJ had a huge day, right? Record-setting even. I didn't hit anything else. I had a flyer on a Hawkinson anytime touchdown, which was plus 190. And then I had Amon-Ra St. Brown over 81.5. I feel like I would just wanted to take Lions overs because I kind of don't believe in the Vikings defense, right? He didn't hit that because the Lions spread the ball around way more than I thought. So miss on that. And then I had both teams over 24.5 as a yes, which would have been a plus 200 hit. And if the Vikings convert that 2-point conversion, they would have done it. They ended up with 23. They could have had 25 if they hit that 2 point. So I was very close. Let's move on to this game, though. The one I think I like the most is, so there's a couple of Colts overs that I like here, as much as I think the Colts offense, I mean, of course the Colts offense is notoriously terrible, but that's factored into the over-unders, and I still think the betting market is overestimating the Vikings defense. Paris Campbell over 45.5. He's not the focal point of the Colts offense, but he's going to be in the slot, and he's going to be the guy that I think a lot of those over-the-middle passes will be to. It'll be either that or like Mo Alley Cox, maybe like they'll do the tight end thing. But I think Paris Campbell over the middle will be something that the Colts can do because everybody else the Vikings have played has been able to do that thing over the middle. And 45.5 is a fairly low over under for what I think is like the second most targeted receiver on the Colts. It's just not a high volume offense, but hey, that's okay because the Vikings will make you a high volume offense. Welcome to your get right game, right? In the same vein, I like Matt Ryan over 22.5 completions. I just like Matt Ryan to find completions. Again, that like I'm a little less comfortable with like a yards over under or a touchdowns or something like that, but I feel really comfortable with the idea of Matt Ryan being able to find his outlets, his blitz counters and all that stuff, getting the ball out quickly. It's what has killed the Vikings all year long is quarterbacks that can get the ball out. And I think Matt Ryan can, even if it's not going to be, crazy dimes down the field and all these throws he used to make when he was younger in his career. So those are two I feel pretty good about. I also feel good. So as much as I'm like downing on the Vikings defense, and they deserve it, they are the bad guys this week, so they're going to get clowned on. But I think I still like the Vikings to win. And I go back to what we talked about at the end of Crossover Thursday yesterday with Jake. If this is a close game, and it's the Vikings, so it's going to be. I mean, these are the rules, right? Moral laws of physics. If this is a close game, the Vikings have a great advantage in that situation. If this comes down to situational football, if this comes down to, who's just got it together right, who's able to make their timeout decisions, their clock management decisions, who is more, well coached in those moments. The Vikings have emphasized that, and the Colts are coached by Jeff Saturday. That is advantage Vikings. And so I really like the Vikings in a close win here. I could see this. I mean, Jake kind of put it in my head yesterday from Locked On Colts, where he kind of told me, like, I could see this being like 31-17 and the Vikings just run away from it. And I could see that world where they just can't keep up with Justin Jefferson and they just aren't the kind of offense that's built to like make big come from behind wins. So it's just like over by, the third quarter. But I just don't trust the Vikings to make a game that close or to make a game, to run away with a game. I mean, we haven't seen them run away with a game since week 1. I would love to see it. I want to see it. I'm desperate to see it. I'm dying to see it. I've got a fever, and seeing that is the only cure to it. But I don't have any faith that we're going to see it. So I'm going with Minnesota, little win. I like the odds of this game being close, and I like the odds of the Vikings winning in that close game scenario. It's a plus 109 for the Vikings to win by 1 to 13 points. So basically any score that's 1 or 2 scores, except for like 13 or 14 and 15 specifically, plus 109. I think the odds on that are pretty good. Being a little bit better than 2-1 odds is pretty good on something that I would say is the most likely outcome here. That's the way I'm going to do it. And that would also be what the spread suggests, right? It's a 4-point spread. And then the last one I am going to take, so I talked up all of this stuff about Justin Jefferson. You can take his over. It's 95.5. That's not what I did here. You can take his over on receptions, which is 7.5 plus 112. I love that bet. Actually, do that bet. Screw that. Let's put another one down. JJ's receptions plus 7.5 or over 7.5 because it's plus 112 on Bet Online, at least as I record this. But I'm actually going to take another flyer. I'm going to put a half unit down on Justin Jefferson getting 2 touchdowns at plus 400. I don't believe he's done that yet this year, unless he did it in week 1. But I only think he got 1 in week 1. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm going off the dome. But 2 Justin Jefferson touchdowns as a flyer. I like his odds to really be able to produce. I love Stephon Gilmore. He's not the guy he was in New England. No Kenny Moore, right? A little bit banged up all over the place. I think this can be a big JJ game. And there is actually a bold prediction coming up that would corroborate that. So let's get into the bold predictions here in a little bit. They are from the listeners, and it is a great way, as always, to wrap up the week. First, though, this episode is brought to you by Total Wine and More. This holiday season, find what you love at Total Wine and More. With so many great bottles to choose from, it's easy to find a new favorite Cabernet or Chardonnay or the perfect gifts for everyone on your list with some help from a friendly guide. And all with the confidence of knowing you found something special for the lowest price. Love what you find only at Total Wine and More. Also, curbside pickup and delivery are available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Drink responsibly. Be 21. It is time for the best part of the week. If you ask me, it is the bold predictions segment. This is where I take bold predictions from you all, the listeners, the craziest, wildest things you can concoct. And if you're right, we party. Thank you all so much for all of your submissions. Let's go over last week's first. We did not hit any much. To nobody's surprise, I think these were pretty out there, but they were fun. Kyle Barker said that each team would have a touchdown scored by a player from Minnesota State, Mankato. This was the closest one because we did get a Thielen touchdown, but we needed a Shane Zylstra touchdown on the other side to satisfy it. We did not get that. But hey, one play away, right? Chris Smith said that the Vikings would get a safety without tackling or sacking a Lions player. I loved that as the idea of one of those classic Lions discipline moments didn't happen. Observed Idiocy said that Joseph would hit a 56-yarder but missed the extra point. The Vikings did lose an extra point worth of value, but not by missing the kick. I do not believe Joseph hit a 50. I think he hit like a 54-yarder though, right? So close. Joshua Lampa said that the Vikings and Lions would both gain their fewest amount of yards up to this point. We did not get there. We had we hit the over. We had the shootout we were promised. Lorenzo said that the only things... Oh, yeah, he had a whole rant about how yards are only good for fantasy football and the Pro Bowl, and that the Vikings would win by not giving up any touchdowns. Neither of those conditions were satisfied. And then Skolator said that the Vikings would break its streak of single-score wins, which I guess they did, but that they would win on a double score, but it wouldn't feel like they did. Like it was a one-score game, but a defensive touchdown iced it on the final drive, that kind of thing. We didn't get there, but I loved the idea of that. Let's move on to next week. The first one comes from Peter Quaranta, who says that the Vikings play Jeff Saturday on a Saturday. Never mentioned that. The Scrabble score for the word Saturday is 12. The Colts score exactly 12 points. Look, again, I can see a world like this is not one of the league's best offenses. I could see a world where they totally just fall apart, even against a bad defense. We've sure watched putrid Vikings offenses do that against the league's worst defenses. So, 12 points. How about like a missed extra point after a touchdown, and then they go for 2 to try to make up for it and get 12. Maybe we have weird safety shenanigans, or maybe it's just 4 field goals. I could see 12 points. I love the idea of a Scrabble score for the word Saturday. That is very funny. I like this one. Shadow Flame says that the Colts' fourth quarter woes continue as a relatively close game quickly gets out of hand and the Vikings outscore the Colts by 20 or more points in the fourth quarter. So this is referencing, obviously, the Colts-Cowboys Sunday night game a couple of weeks ago, where it was a 2-point game headed into the fourth quarter, and the Cowboys ended up winning by 35. It's a 33-point quarter. Just an absolute catastrophe. It was like turnovers, and that's something I probably should have talked about more about with the Colts, that they are a turnover-prone team. And, the Vikings didn't get any turnovers against the Lions. They tried to, and check out my Patreon for how they tried to do that, but it didn't come. But this is a team that turns the ball over. So maybe we have something like that, right? It was like score, like Dallas scores, turnover, Dallas scores, turnover, Dallas scores, like one of those, like when you accidentally set the difficulty setting too high in Madden. It was incredible. Denver Ludvigsen says the Vikings get a defensive get-right game and pitch a shutout. He also said that like half the touchdowns will be defenses. I just want the pitch a shutout part. Vikings shutout is the bold prediction here. But I like the idea of a defensive get-right game. I've been telling crossover partners all year that the Vikings defense is your offense's get-right game. If your offense is struggling, if you're having a bad time, you get to come into Minnesota and get your stuff together and have a little bit of a bounce back and feel like you have some rhythm, even if you lose a close game. Let's have one for the defense. How about Matt Ryan and that ailing offense gives the defense a get-right game that we can feel a little better about. Malcolm Biggles says after the first score, this one is just so bizarre. I was inspired. He said after the first score of the game, at no point will the combined score of both teams be an even number. Okay. So this is going to be really, really hard to satisfy because the two primary ways to score are 3 and 7. So you get a 3, but then you need to have something other than a 3 and a 7, and you need it to be like only even numbers to not go back to an even number. Does that make sense? Like it needs to be, a field goal makes it 3, and then it needs to be like safeties. It needs to be missed extra points or 2-point conversions to keep that, like the scores all need to be even numbers to stop the odd numbered score from switching over. It's a very weird way to think about this game. It would be an absolutely incredible outcome. I would be shocked if you could find a game that this happened in that wasn't like a 7-0 game where there was only one score in the whole game. But hey, it's the bold prediction segment. We're not here to talk about likely things, so I love it, Malcolm. David Whitting says 2 Vikings, not Zadarius Smith or Hunter, have a multiple sack game. I also should mention Danielle Hunter is questionable for the game. He is not declared out or anything like that. I do not believe any Vikings are declared out. There's a whole bunch of questionables with Garrett Bradbury, Harrison Smith, Dantzler, who's been dealing with an illness. He did practice on Friday, on Thursday, and then of course Hunter. So that is something to mention, by the way. But we have 2 Vikings, not named those 2 guys, that have a multiple sack game. So let's get Tonga time, baby. Also, Harrison Phillips is questionable. So we will have some backups in the game that will be able to get a little bit more run. Maybe like Patrick Jones if Danielle Hunter can't go, that kind of thing. Get Quackin' has the last one I'm going to do today, which is that JJ brings the JJ 2K campaign pace down to under 100 yards a game after this one. Luckily, the math is really easy for this. He is at exactly 1,500 yards. He has 4 games remaining, so he needs to get 500 yards in the last 4 games. To get to a 100-yard per game pace, he needs to get 200 of those yards out of the way so that he'll have 300 in the remaining 3 games. Easy math, right? There's some copying off me in math class. I got to live up to my tagline sometimes. That would mean a 200-yard game for Justin Jefferson. His over-under is 95.5. You're saying that he's going to double that, and that's one of the bigger over-unders in the league this week. So that would be quite bold. Thank you all again so much for your bold prediction submissions. We'll come check back on these next Friday. In the meantime, I'll talk to y'all on Monday. We'll talk to you in the postcast. Check out the postcast. It comes on this podcast feed, or if you're a YouTube watcher, go to Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page. It's live on there. Me and Sam will break down whatever happens in this Colts game, and then, of course, we'll keep talking about it throughout the week. Vikings have a chance to clinch the North. This might be the last time that we talk with the Vikings not having clinched a playoff spot in the NFC. There's a chance, and even if the Vikings lose, there's a chance the Lions go lose to the Jets in New York, and the same outcome happens. So we will all be watching intently. I will talk to you all then. Check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Check me out on Patreon. Donate to a rabbit, get a jersey, get a raffle ticket, all that good stuff. I will see you all next week. And as always, Skull.